Okay, morning all. Welcome back to the Sanhedrin Shiur. If you recall, we were talking about how one comforts a Kohen Gadol when he's in mourning, and how a Kohen Gadol comforts others when they are in mourning. That's the piece of Gemarah that we're involved in. And last week, no, it was last week because I wasn't here. It must have been 2 weeks ago. We got into an interesting discussion about various minhagim, various customs of mourning, various superstitions, various bubbermeisters, and very interesting stuff like that we spoke about last time. And then, of course, on Sunday last week, I ran off to the UK to attend a shiva of a very close friend of mine. And I spent most of the week there with them, talking about death and the minhagim of death. And seemed to be an interesting topic. We were discussing the various sources, as we were in our shiur, of the various minhagim. So I've been doing a bit of research, and it's fascinating how you go one place and you find yourself very shortly, 3 clicks later, somewhere completely different. But we spoke briefly about the various things that one says at a shiva or at a yortzeit, or when somebody loses somebody. And of course, for us Brits, it's very obvious what we say, isn't it? We say, I wish you long life. Or if you say it in Hebrew, Chaim Arukim, or you say Arichat Yamim, length of days. And I thought, well, where's that come from? What's the source of that minhag? Because it is a very, very British minhag. It is only done in Britain and the Commonwealth nations. Effectively, it's only done in Britain, Australia, and South Africa. There are a few Americans that are familiar with it, but they're probably of British origin. So I started to look around and tried to find a source for this comment, or this greeting, this bracha of I wish you long life. And I haven't found any proper source at all. Nobody seems to write. Lots of people write about it and they all say, we don't know where it came from. There doesn't appear to be any clear source for this. The best that I saw, I think, was that we're generally speaking about when somebody loses a parent. That's where it all began. And when one loses a parent, you can no longer do the mitzvah of kibud av v'eim. You can no longer, physically at least, do the mitzvah of honoring your parents. The mitzvah of honoring your parents is one of the very few mitzvot which are given a specific reward. And that reward is a long life. Laman yarichu yamim. So that your days will be lengthened on this earth. It's in the 10 Commandments, if you want to look it up. In order that your days will be lengthened. So the best source that I saw for this was the idea that since you can no longer do that mitzvah because your parent is no longer here, we are giving you a bracha that nevertheless, the fact that you can't do this mitzvah, nevertheless, we wish you should have a long life, or we are recognizing that you did the mitzvah of kibud av v'eim, and now it's over, but you've done the mitzvah of kibud av v'eim, and therefore we wish and hope that you will be rewarded appropriately with a long life. And I think that's quite a nice idea. I've no idea whether that is genuinely the source, but I think it's a nice idea. I saw lots of people wrote that they were uncomfortable with this idea of wishing somebody a long life, especially an old person, because what did I wish my aunt when she had Yorkshire for her father just before she passed away? She was 105. I'm going to wish her a long life. Well, I mean, that's a bit pointless, isn't it? If you say, I wish that you will have a long life, well, she's already had a long life, so that's a pointless bracha. And if you're wishing that you'll have a long life from here on in, well, that's very, very unlikely because she's already 105. So there were quite a few people that wrote and where I was looking and said they were uncomfortable with this idea, especially with an old person. And also there were some people wrote that they were uncomfortable with this expression because some people might not want to live a long time without their loved one, and it's almost like saying to them, "Come on, buck your ideas up." Well, that was a bit harsh, to be honest, but there was something I read which I could really, really relate to, and I'm going to read it to you just because I think it's very interesting, and it's exactly how I used to feel as a kid. First of all, you need to know, as a kid, I was very, very shy. Okay, I know that's hard to believe, but I was painfully shy. I hated it when I had to go to public places and do things in public. And I used to go to shul from the age that I could walk, probably from 3 years old. And I would never go and open up the ark for Anim Zemirot. I was too shy to go up to the ark and pull the cord and open the ark. I would never answer the phone in my house in case it was somebody I didn't know until I was about 12 or something. I was really very, very shy. And so if I ever had to go to a situation where there was a bereavement, I would, and I had to say those words, "I wish you long life." It was like so painful for me. I just found it really, really difficult, and I would try and avoid it at all costs. And if I really had to do it, I would practice it in my head a million times before I actually got there. I don't know if any of you can relate to that experience, but that was my experience of this. I found shiva houses, and I mean, avoided them like the plague as much as I possibly could. But if I really had to go, it was an ordeal for me. And as I was reading around this whole topic, I found this blog. I don't know who it is. It's a chap called Dr. Rod's Odd Blog. Don't know who he is. Don't know. Well, I could read about who he is. It says about me. Who am I? Let's have a look. Who is he? That's who he is. He
I think you
is.
need to share.
Oh, yeah, I haven't shared. Sorry. Thank you for telling me that. There he is. This is this chap, Dr. Rod Blog. He's a doctor and he lives and works in South Yorkshire.
Blessed.
That's Brian Blessed, yeah. But this is, I think, the chap we're talking about. And he's an interesting chap, this guy called Rod Kirsch, Dr. Rod Kirsch. Anyway, this is what he wrote, what I came across. He wrote a blog called I Wish You Long Life. I'll just read it to you. It's not very long. Look, it's only one page. So he says, this is what you say to a Jewish person who's recently bereaved, either in the days following a death or on the anniversary of the death of their mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter. I don't think close friends, cousins, aunts, or uncles apply, no matter the sense of loss. The reason I say this is because I've never felt comfortable with the phrase. When my parents died, people expressed these words to me. I guess it's a useful filler when you don't know what else to say, potentially more meaningful than "I'm so sorry" or "he was too young" or other such platitudes. Interestingly, it is what the very words mean that causes me the greatest challenge. I wish you long life. Does this suggest when your relative has died, the other person is wishing that you live a long time now that the other is gone, no matter the quality of that remaining life, whether filled with sorrow or grief? And what about the person that died, whether they had a long life or not? Where does that enter the equation? And this is the bit that I could relate to. I can remember when I was 14 at school in Israel, going with my headmaster Moshe and other classmates to visit the family of a soldier who'd been killed in action. I don't remember the circumstances. The family in the predominantly Yemenite village of Magdiel were in grief. I remember the men sitting cross-legged on the floor, the father in tears, us uncomfortable, awkward. It is likely that something similar to "I wish you long life" was said in Hebrew amidst the ululating and torn clothes, the covered mirrors and unshaven faces. As society moves on, death becomes more distant. We live longer. Fewer of us, in the West at least, experience death. Most adults have never seen a dead body. Most into middle age have both parents living. This wasn't the way of the world in the past, nor was it how we evolved as a society or a people. We have become estranged, alienated from life's end. And with this, likely the customs, the phrases, unspoken responses, how to grieve, how to celebrate life. I can still recall my mum's discomfort at my reticence to say, I wish you long life, to a bereaved family, friend or relative. It was weird then, and I struggle now. I know that my embarrassment at relating to the old ways shouldn't be an obstacle to tradition. After all, it's just a few simple words. But where do you go? What do you say when your wish is to convey something deeper, more meaningful, long-lasting than that what is in effect a catchphrase? At a recent funeral of a family friend,
Is he frozen?
You've gone, Johnny.
Does he know he's gone?
Johnny,
somebody
you've
phone
gone.
him. Somebody phone him.
I'll phone him.
Yeah.
No, he's gone off. He knows.
Did you text him or phone him?
Michael said he knows.
Here he is.
He's here.
don't know where you all went to then. Sorry.
We were here. You went.
I'm reading off this thing, and suddenly I turn around and you've all gone. Anyway, I'll just finish these last couple of lines.
The last couple of paragraphs, Johnny. The last couple of paragraphs.
Okay. So he says, I can still recall
screen.
my mum's...
Share the screen.
Yeah.
Share the screen, right? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So he says, I can still recall my mum's discomfort at my reticence to say I wish you long life to a bereaved relative or family friend. It was weird then, and I struggle now. I know that my embarrassment at relating to the old ways shouldn't be an obstacle to tradition. After all, it's just a few simple words. But where do you go? What do you say when your wish is to convey something deeper, more meaningful, long-lasting than what is in effect a catchphrase? At a recent funeral of a family friend, I can't remember whether I used the phrase. I don't recall what I said or how I said it, whether a hug, a handshake, slap on the back. These events are always so filled with emotion that capturing the moment is difficult. I guess I should man up for the next occasion when the traditional expression is called for. After all, it's only words, and words, whether they are weighted with meaning or lost on the wind, have power and significance beyond their uttering. I thought that was a really thoughtful piece, and I could really relate to that. It's an expression which has in some ways become meaningless, but we should try, I think, that when we say whatever we say, we should say it with meaning and with feeling. I heard an expression recently, I would say a year or two ago, which I have tried to replicate. And somebody said, I think it might have been Rebbitts and Susie Wise. Don't quote me on that. It might not have been her, but I think it might have been her. It was Ga'aguim nechmadim. You should have sweet memories. And I thought that was a really nice expression to say to somebody. You should have ga'aguim nechmadim. You should have sweet memories. And I think that these phrases are stock phrases, catchphrases, and we say them. As long as we say what we say with meaning and feeling, then it doesn't really matter what we say. But I thought Ga'aguim Nechmadim or Matukim, sweet memories, is a nice thing to say to somebody. I then did a little bit of research because, as I said earlier, wishing you long life is a very British or a very Commonwealth thing. And as Johnny pointed out, you say it to somebody in Israel, they look like you're bonkers. They don't know what you're talking about. So what do they say here in Israel? What is their stock phrase, if you like? Well, it's interesting because there seems to be a little bit of a diversity between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and also between Chilonim and Datiyim. The Chilonim expression, the Chiloni expression, which a lot of people use here in Israel, is Shelo Teideu Od Tsa'ar. You should not know any further trouble. Shelo Teideu Od Tsa'ar. You should not know any other trouble. That's a nice thing to say to somebody. Another expression which is used here in Israel is Mishtatfim B'Tsa'archa. We are Mishtatfim. We join in your pain. We feel your pain. We join in your pain. Mishtatfim B'Tsa'archa. That's another expression that is said. So that's what the Chilonim tend to say. One of those two expressions. The Datiyim have a slightly different expression, which you'll be familiar with. L'neshama tiyeh aliyah. The neshama, the soul, should have an elevation. And it's customary here in Israel. We spoke about this briefly last week, about eating at a shiva house, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But it's customary on a yort site in Hasidic circles. It arose in Hasidic circles to bring a l'chaim to shul on the yort site and a piece of cake, and for them to drink a l'chaim to the neshama, and to say a bracha on the food, and to say l'neshama tiyeh aliyah. The neshama of the so and so should have an aliyah, or le'ilui nishmat, for the raising of the soul of the deceased. Why is that?
Sorry, Johnny.
Say that again, David.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say that the song that's having a leer is very much the American minhag.
Yeah, correct. I was going to come to the Americans in a minute because I found some interesting American ones. So the Israelis say l'neshama tiyeh aliyah or le'ilui nishmat. If you're dati, if you're not dati, they tend to say mishtatfim b'tzarcha or shelo te'idu od tsar. And interestingly, I looked up the origins of the minhag of drinking a l'chaim to the neshama. Why would you want to drink a l'chaim at, if you go to the first minyan here, you'd be finished by 6:25. Why do you want to be drinking a vodka or a whiskey at 6:25 in the morning? Well, it comes from the Hasidim. And of course, the Hasidim, their whole shtick when they all started was Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with happiness, and they were forever drinking a l'chaim. The Hasidim were forever drinking any excuse, right? A simcha, a levaya, anything, drink a l'chaim. So it comes from that, and it's the opportunity to say a bracha. So that's what they say here in Israel. Now, there is a very specific minhag in, here we go, the Yekkers. Okay, the Yekkers. Now, what do the Yekkers say? David, do you know what the Yekkers say?
Abias Goel Tzedek.
Yes, well done. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I started doing this. I obviously don't have enough Yekkisher friends. But the Yekkers say, Ad bias goel tzedek, until the Redeemer will come, meaning until Mashiach comes. And you know what the response is to that? What are you meant to say back? The response is, Bimheira biyamenu, may it be speedily in our days. Okay, that's what the Yekkers say. The Yekkers being the German, West German minhag, as opposed to Eastern European. Okay, so they say ad bias God tzedek, and you're meant to say bimheri b'yameinu. Now, let's just go a little bit back in this and say there's one particular group of yekkers that say something slightly different, and that is the Swiss yekkers. The Swiss
Breaking up
yekkers.
again. You're breaking up again, Johnny.
The Swiss yekkers say, can you hear me?
Up, Johnny.
No, okay, I'll just wait a second until you can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so the Swiss yekkers, they say ad bias goel tzedek, and you're meant to say Amen, and then they're meant to say bimheri b'yameinu, and then there's something else. It's a whole long conversation they have, but that's for the Swiss yekkers. And then, of course, the Hasidim, they say in Yiddish down here on the page, die neshama soll haben an aliyah. That's just Yiddish for the soul should have an aliyah. And that's again the American version is that they say in English the neshama should have an aliyah. So these are all the stock phrases from around the world that you say, which is very interesting. And of course, the important thing is to say whatever you say with meaning. Okay, so that was just what I've been up to all week. Yes, Johnny.
I just remember from Manchester to say, "Hamakam Yanachem Eschem," the frummer people of Mexico. That's the Dayanim used to say, the Rabbanim.
Okay, yeah, we'll come back to that in a sec. Yes, Julia, you're muted.
And I also used to have to practice that at home, like you practice.
Yes, definitely.
I went here to a Shiva house where the people were of Indian descent, and they wished you a long and happy life, which I think is very nice.
That's nice. Well, again, that will have been an addition, but I wish you a long life. India, of course, a part of the former British Empire, one of the Commonwealth countries. That fits in, doesn't it? Because this long life business definitely originated in Britain, which is why it's common in South Africa and Australia, and I guess in the few Indian Jewish communities that there are there. That's nice to know as well. Okay, so that's interesting. That the bottom line is nobody knows where it came from. It's a nice thing to say to wish somebody that, but it's got to be said with a meaning. Just go back to what Johnny just said. Hamakom yenachem etchem b'toch sharei v'elitzeir b'Yerushalayim is a minhag Ashkenaz. It means Hamakom yenachem etchem, the makom, the place, Hashem, should comfort you amongst all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. It's a very Ashkenaz thing to say. The Sephardim don't say that. They say something different. Do you know what the Sephardim say? Who knows what the Sephardim say in the equivalent of Hamakom Yenachem, which is what the Ashkenazim say? They say, Min hashamayim tenachumu. May you be comforted from heaven. Min hashamayim, from the heavens, tenachumu. May you be comforted. So that's another bracha that the Sephardim use. So it's very interesting. And what I was just discussing before we started with Johnny was how interesting it is that we, or wherever we come from, we happen to be on this particular group, all Brits, but we are very much in our own little bubble. And you know, we don't really know, unless we start looking around, we don't know other people's minhagim, which means that they probably don't know ours. And one of the beautiful things about our particular community, in particular, and being in Israel in general, is that you get to know and learn about other people's ways of life, other people's minhagim, what's important to other people, what's not important to other people. And being the Gabbai of the shul has definitely taught me a huge amount of things, because I now understand how important it is for a Sephardi who has a yortzeit to get Shvi'i and to say the Kaddish at the end. That was never a shtick in England. You know, you got Shlishi or Shishi if you were the most important person. But the person that for the Sephardim, particularly the North African Sephardim, to say that Kaddish after laning and to have Shvi'i, to have the last Aliyah and say that Kaddish is really, really important. And so it's something that I've had to learn as I've gone along as being the Gabbai. But it's been a really enlightening and educational and uplifting experience, learning about other people's minhagim, learning how other people say things, do things, what's important to them. And it's been a big eye opener. And those people like myself, until I was in my 50s, who spend all their life in one community, who think that the whole of the Jewish world is like that. It's just not the case. I mean, especially coming from a place like Manchester, which is a very, even within the UK bubble, Manchester is a bubble within a bubble. And I didn't really realise. I really didn't realise how much of a bubble within a bubble it was. And I certainly didn't realise how much of a bubble the UK was. And it's one of the beauties of living in Israel and of mixing with other people is to understand other people's minhagim, what's important to them, and what makes them tick. And it's something I think that we should celebrate very much, and we should take on board. There's no reason why we shouldn't wish people long life, but if they look at you blankly, you might want to say, you might want to say "L'neshamati ya aliyah" or something like that, and you might get more of a look of recognition to that. But anyway, we've spent half the shiur now just going through that. So let's do some Gemarah, because it is all relevant. Is the Gemarah on the screen for you?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So this all started, of course, because we're dealing with issues of avelut. And what we said last time was we spoke about how the Kohen Gadol comforts somebody when he goes to a funeral. And we spoke about the shura. And we asked a question which we never got to the answer, which is not unusual for us because we would get sidetracked. The question that we asked was, it is clear from the Mishnah that we've read that the way it was done was that the mourners stood still and the comforters walked past them in a row. And we know, and we discussed this last time, that the way we do it is that the comforters stand in 2 rows and the mourners pass by them in the middle. And we asked the question, why do we do it differently to what it is described here in the Mishnah? And I said to you that eventually we will get to the answer. And I'm hoping that today we will get to the answer. So let's get cracking. So we spoke last time about how
Was that not just for the Cohen? Maybe it was just for the Cohen that they had to do.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
No.
And you'll see here exactly now that it wasn't.
Okay.
We spoke about how the Kohen Gadol comforted others. And now where you can see my cursor is flashing on the screen here, or up to here. Ukeshahu omeid b'shura. We're on page 107, by the way, for those who got the Steinsaltz. When he stands in the row, meaning when the Kohen Gadol is the Avel, he's the mourner, and he stands umit nachem mei acherim, and he is comforted by others. In other words, the mourners are now going to walk past him and presumably say whatever they said at that time to somebody who was mourning. I wish you long life. L'neshamatia aliyah, zulzain and neshama zulza habana and aliyah, whatever it was that they said in those days. When he did that, what happened was sgan mimino, his deputy stood by his right hand side. V'rosh beit av v'chol ha'am mismolo, and the head of the day's Kohanim's group, the debate. We spoke about it last time. Kohanim was split into different groups as to who did the avodah, the service on any particular day, and that day's rota's head and the rest of the people were on his left-hand side. So we now know from this that the way it worked was you had, if you just imagine this situation, you've got the Kohen Gadol who's mourning, and presumably any of his brothers or sisters that are standing with him are also mourning. His deputy stands with him on his right-hand side, and all the people pass by him on their left-hand side. And they say, wish you long life, 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 or whatever it is that they say. And they go past. That's what we can say. Now, they're going to just drill down. The Gemarah is going to drill down now on what the Mishnah has said. Because if we just go back to the Mishnah, you'll remember that we spoke about the Mashuach, the one who was anointed. And we spoke about an emeritus Kohen Gadol. Do you remember? We spoke about an emeritus Kohen Gadol. Michael Krauss looked up for us what a king who has abdicated is called, and he said he's called the monarch emeritus. Well, the Kohen Gadol emeritus is the fellow as follows. What happens was, just to remind you, you have Moshe, who is the Kohen Gadol. They appoint Chaim as his deputy in case something happens to him. Moshe then becomes Tameh for whatever reason. He has an accident, he becomes Tameh. For 7 days, he cannot do the service. So Chaim, his deputy, steps in and becomes the Kohen Gadol for those 7 days. Yaakov then becomes his deputy. So we've now got 3 people. We've got the Kohen Gadol, who is Tameh. We've got the original deputy, who is now the stand-in. And we've got the deputy to the stand-in. What happens when the Kohen Gadol, who was Tameh, comes back? Because he's only Tameh for 7 days. Does what he's got to do with the Parah Aduma and all that stuff, mikveh. So he then comes to be the Kohen Gadol again. The stand-in does not go back to be the deputy. He now is called the emeritus. And the deputy stays as the deputy. The new deputy stays as the deputy. So this fellow who was the Kohen Gadol for just a week, he's now the emeritus deputy. Once you've been the Kohen Gadol, you don't go back to being a deputy. You now got the status of emeritus. And we said that when the Kohen Gadol goes to a Shiva house, the deputy goes with him and the emeritus, if there is one, goes with him. But have a look at our Gemarah. When he is comforted by others, the deputy is on his right-hand side. But we don't hear about the emeritus. Where's the emeritus? The Gemarah asks the question. Aval mashuach she'avar la ate gabe. But the mashuach, the emeritus, the one who was previously anointed, does not pass before him, does not go with him does not go to the funeral to wish him long life, to comfort him. My tama, why not? Says the Gemarah, asks the Gemarah. Why not? Where is he? Now, don't read on and tell me why this emeritus is basically told to stay away. Anyone? Why shouldn't he go and comfort the Kohen Gadol? You're muted, Johnny. We can't hear you.
Is it something to do with Tommy?
No.
No.
Is it because he's not his friend? He's really a rival.
Yes. Let's have a look what the Gemarah says.
Oh.
He's a rival. What he says, what he might think is, this chap is not come to wish me well. He's come to wish me evil because he's jealous of me because I'm the Kohen Gadol and he was Kohen Gadol only for a week. Right? And he says, Chal Shada'ate, he might become upset. Savar, he might think, Karchadibi, he's happy about me being in a bereaved state. He doesn't like me. He's not my friend because I'm the Kohen Gadol and he's not. So the Rav Papa. Okay, no, Rav Papa. We come to Rav Papa in a minute. So I've got a question on that which the Gemarah doesn't answer. Anybody got a question on that?
Well, I suppose the question is, what does this emeritus person do? He hasn't got a role, except does he step in during the Shiva? Does he
No,
step in?
because he's no longer the deputy. The deputy steps in when the Kohen Gadol's not able to. The new deputy. So this emeritus fellow is just
Hasn't got a role.
there. He is supernumerary, and that's why the Gemarah says he's going to feel aggrieved and may have some bad thoughts towards the Kohen Gadol. So I had the following question. Well, if that's the case, surely that applies to the actual deputy. Because when is the deputy going to step in? When the Kohen Gadol can't do his job. Right? It's a bit like the understudy, right? The understudy in the West End or on Broadway, right? The understudy to the star. They're chalashing for the star to get a sore throat and can't sing so that they get a chance, right? That's what I would do if I was the understudy. You know, I'd be dying to have a go. You know, when you're the substitute, when you're number 12 on the pitch, you see it in the football now. We're watching whoever's putting themselves through the boring experience of watching the Euros, right? You see those glum faces on the bench. Why? Because they want to get on. They're dying for somebody to get injured so that they can get on. So why do we not say that this deputy shouldn't go, because he's going to have even more bad feeling towards the Kohen Gadol. He's going to wish him to get Tomei or die or break a leg or something so that he can come and step in. So why doesn't the Gemarah ask that question?
Because we need a deputy. I mean, he's necessary.
Okay, so he doesn't have to go to the Shiva, though.
Maybe it's
Why
obvious.
don't we say that the deputy shouldn't go to the Shiva the same way as the emeritus shouldn't go to the Shiva? Do you not think that's a good question? Go on, Michael.
I said maybe it's obvious, so that's why it's not mentioned.
But he does go. That's the point. He does go. He stood there on his right-hand side. Sgan Mimi, no, he's there.
Well, in case the Kohen Gadol accidentally becomes Tomei while he's there, you need somebody to step in immediately.
Well, he's not there in the Beit HaMikdash. This is not going on in the Beit HaMikdash. It's going on in his house or in the funeral parlor. And do you think that's a good question? I think it's a really great question. I don't know why nobody asks it. I think possibly the answer is this: that this fellow, the Kohen Gadol here now, is an Avel. And I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that while he's an Avel, he's not going to be doing the service, because even though he's not allowed to be metamei himself, he's not allowed to get tamei, he's probably not in the frame of mind to do the service. He probably isn't doing the service at that time. It will be interesting to know, al pi halacha, whether a Kohen Gadol who is an Avel does the service on Yom Kippur. I suspect he doesn't, in which case the Sgan is actually the acting Kohen Gadol, and therefore he's actually doing the job there and then, almost like Julia said, and therefore he's not going to have bad thoughts towards the Kohen Gadol. When he's finished standing in and he becomes the emeritus, well, as we've said, you've had it now. You can never have another go once you're an emeritus. You're finished. So it could well be that he's actually doing the job at the time and therefore doesn't have bad thoughts against the Kohen Gadol. I think personally the question's better than the answer, but it's the best I can come up with at the moment. If anybody can come up with something better, I would be very happy to hear it. Right, let's see what Rav Papa's got to say. Rav Papa says, Shma mina meha matnita tlat. Shma mina, learn from here, meha matnita, from this Mishnah. You can see lots of examples here of tap and shin being interchangeable. All a lot of those taps, a lot of them become shins. You can see Mishnah and then matnita Mishnah. Tlat. What's tlat? Tell me when you can hear them again, please. And then wobbly again, I'm assuming should perhaps in a minute or so, few seconds. Any good? Any good? Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes, better.
So, okay, I was talking about the tafs and the shins. Tafs and shins are interchangeable, Aramaic to Hebrew. So, meha matnita, change that to a shin. Mishnah, you can see the word Mishnah in there. Talat, change those two tafs to a shin. What do you get?
Shalosh.
Shalosh. So from this Mishnah, we can learn three things. What can we learn, says Rav Papa? Shma mina, we can learn this. Number one, hainu sgan, hainu mamuneh. Another word for the deputy is mamuneh, the appointed one. We had it in the Mishnah, it speaks about mamuneh, and in the Gemarah, it uses the word sgan. So Rav Papa says that that means that those two terms are interchangeable. Second thing we can learn is, and here we're coming to the answer to our original question, Avelim omdim, the mourners stand, v'chol ha'am ovrim, and all the people pass by them, not the way we do it, okay, where the people stand and the mourners pass. And the third thing we learn is Avelim lismol hamanamchmin hein omdin. The Avelim, the mourners, stand to the left of those who are consoling them. That's what we learn from that Mishnah. So Rav Papa has told us what we learned from that, and now we find the answer to our question coming up. Tanu Rabbanan. There is another brighter. And this brighter goes like this. Barishona, in the beginning, in other words, initially, when the original minhag was, Hayu Avelim Omdim. The mourners stood still, V'chol Ha'am Ovrim, and all the people passed them by, like it says in the Gemarah. But what happened was, in Yerushalayim, there was an episode of problem. V'hayu shtei mishpachot b'Yerushalayim. There were two families in Jerusalem. Mitgarot zu bazu. What's that word mitgarot mean? Lehitgare. Ani mitgare. What does that mean? What word do you know that you can see in the middle of there that you're probably familiar with? Anyone?
Ger.
Etgar. What is an etgar? Anybody know what an etgar is? No? David Marks, you know what etgar means? Again?
A disagreement?
No, etgar means a challenge in modern Hebrew. So that's quite a common word. You'll hear it quite often. Etgar means a challenge. So lehitgare means to challenge or to quarrel or to disagree. And here it means to fight. Here it means to fight. If I'm not mistaken, I think I had a look over here. I put it up on there. Yeah, there you go. Mitgarot. I put it into Google Translate. Look at the word lehitgarot means all of these things. means to tease, to taunt, to challenge, to be provoked, to pick a quarrel, all of those things, the hitgarot. But etgar is the word that you'll hear quite commonly. So let's go back to the Gemarah. So there were these two families in Yerushalayim that were fighting. And what were they fighting about? In a simple word, they were fighting about kavod, honor. Zot omeret, this family said, Ani overet tchila, I'm going to pass by the mourners first. Zot omeret, and the other family said, oh no, you're not. Ani overet tchila, I'm going to pass by them first. And it was an unholy mess, and it was just not very nice. It's very reminiscent of a very famous story in the Gemarah of the Kohanim. And yes, Michael, tell us the story.
That was before the temple was destroyed, Hamza and Bar Hamza.
Okay, that wasn't what I was referring to, but you're right, that was also about kavod. I was thinking of another story where one person wanted to go before another and it ended up in an unholy mess. Anybody know what I'm referring to? And as a result of that, the whole of halacha was changed. We have mentioned it before in the past in certain fora. And that is the Kohanim who were going to clear out the Mizbeach. They used to go up the ramp and it used to be first come, first served. Whichever Kohen got there first had the honor of clearing out the Mizbeach and doing the Avodah. And what happened was, can't even remember exactly where this Gemarah is. It might be Tanit, but don't quote me. What happened was two Kohanim were running up the ramp to the Mizbeach to do the job, and one of them fell behind a little bit and realized he wasn't going to get there before the other one. So what did he do?
He tripped the other one.
Well, that wouldn't have been so bad if he'd have tripped the other one.
He schlepped him.
He did worse than that. He stabbed him.
Oh.
And killed him. He killed him, right? He killed him. And so the terrible thing. So after that, the rabbis instituted that there would be no more first come, first served. The avodah would be done by lottery, and it would be done by rota. And there would be a rota. 1 week it would be this family, another week it would be that family. And so there would be no more free-for-all. So whereby, but think about it, what are these Kohanim doing? They're running up to do a mitzvah, and they were so busy doing their mitzvah that they killed somebody. We, I'm afraid, have not learned our lesson. It's still going on. People are so busy doing the mitzvah that they fail to see the bigger picture, that they're actually doing aveiros. And I'm sure you can think of many examples of that. So this is an example here of the same thing. These two families wanted to do the mitzvah of being Menachem Avel first. I want to go first. No, I want to go first. And they cause a big argument. And of course, neither of them end up comforting the mourner, because the mourner just sees a big fight. So what did the rabbis do? Hitkinu. They made a decree, a takana. Sheyehei ha'am omdin. The people will stand in rows, va'avelim ovrin, and the mourners will pass through in between them, which is the way that we do it now. So, what I said...
That's the Shura, though, isn't it? That's just the Shura.
That's the Shura, yes.
Yeah,
and then when it comes to the Shiva house, we revert back to the original way, which is that the mourners sit. Here we're standing, but we have them sitting, and then everybody passes by and gives their good wishes. But at the Shura, the reason that we do it is for this Gemarah. Yeah. And so you won't remember, and I didn't either, but I listened to the Shir when I was preparing for this one. I asked right at the beginning of last time Shir 2 weeks ago why we do it differently, and if anybody knew why we do it differently, and this is the answer. So I love it when we find a Gemarah that explains something that we do and we never knew we did it, or why we did it. And this is an example of that. So the reason that it changed was for basically kavod habriot, to maintain the dignity of the public, so that we will not have a bun fight as to who is going to do the mitzvah first, and a covered fres to get there first. Yes, I can see that David Marks is dying to tell us something. His fingers hovering there. No, David?
No, I wasn't actually, but as you pointed your fingers, just going back on what we were talking about before with the emeritus, it reminds me when I was young in the United Synagogue, and when the emeritus was replaced by the new rabbi, and the emeritus stayed in the same area and in the same community, and they stuck him on a chair on the bimmer, a special chair for the emeritus. And I can think of at least 2 occasions when there was enmity between the emeritus and the incumbent. And,
I think it's an inevitability, David.
Yeah,
I think it's an inevitability. I don't know about you, but in London, but certainly in very, very many Manchester shuls, United Synagogue shuls, there are 2 little cells for the rabbi to sit in, right? One on either side of the Oren Kodesh, right? Now, the way it worked in Shrubberies was this, and I'm going back to my childhood. Rabbi Gerdis, Zichronov Livracha, who was the Rav when I was a kid, he sat, as you're facing the Oren Kodesh, he sat in the little cell on the left-hand side. He passed away, so there was no emeritus, and the new Rav came, and that was Laser Wise, Shlita, now one of the senior Rabbonim in the Eder Charedis here in Jerusalem. So he, out of kavod for Rabbi Gerdis's memory, sat in the right-hand side one, right? So that the left-hand side one was empty.
Your side of the shul. That was your side of the shul. That was your side of the shul.
Yeah, my side of the shul, that's right. Now, what was interesting is, when Laser Wise left and Rabbi Ginsbury came, it was all expected that he would go and sit in Rabbi Gerdis's side, right? Because for the same reason, not to take off the cover of what was effectively the emeritus, even though he was no longer in the community, he'd gone to Israel, but he didn't. He went into Rabbi Wise's one on my side of the shul, as you call it. And I'm going to let you into a secret that goes back now 38 years. And the answer to the question is of why he did that. Why did he not go into Rabbi Gerdis's seat? Why did he go into the right-hand side one when he really should have gone into the other one? It's because on the front row on Rabbi Gerdis's side, right next to where he would be sitting, was an extremely cantankerous old member who who had not voted for this particular new incumbent, and was very vociferous about it, and was a particularly unpleasant man, actually. And I was only a kid. I was only in my 20s, so it was nothing to do with me. But the senior people in the shul at that time suggested to Rabbi Ginsbury that it would be much better for him if he sat on the right-hand side of the shul instead of the left-hand side of the shul, because of this particularly unpleasant, cantankerous individual who sat right on the front row, literally right next to Rabbi Gerdis's seat. And that is the truth, believe it or not. So yes, all the English shuls, certainly that I know of, have these 2 little boxes for the rabbi. And if you've got an emeritus, as David says, you pop him in there. And of course, when the chief rabbi comes, he goes into one of those. But just to go on to David's point about enmity, it's human nature. My son Dan had it in Bowden twice, that he came along and he wasn't even taking over. He was initially the youth rabbi, and there was enmity, not from his point of view, but the incumbent saw him as a threat, because here along comes somebody new, fresh, new ideas, etc., popular and what have you. And he saw it as a threat, and actually he wasn't very pleasant to him. Then he left, and Dan actually took over interregnum, as it were, for 18 months until the next incumbent came. And then when the next incumbent came, Dan effectively was demoted back to being the assistant rabbi, and effectively was also emeritus at the same time, because he had been, it's a bit like our emeritus Cohen Gadol, really. And the relationship wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, because the new guy comes in, he wants to stamp his authority on the place, and it's very difficult if you've got somebody there who's already been there. Dan went to Perth, and the emeritus, who'd been there 28 years, was still in the community, and that was very difficult at first. This fellow, Rabbi Freilich, had the good sense, at least for the first few months, to go and daven in a different place, right? So as not to step on Dan's toes and be there as a comparison for everybody, to make comparisons either positive or negative between the new guy and the emeritus. And I think that was a very sensible and sensitive thing to do, and it was the correct thing to do. And I think, David said he can think of several occasions where there was enmity. I think if there isn't, it would be surprising, and it would be it would speak very highly of the two people involved if there wasn't some kind of friction and rivalry. And I think that this Gemara explains that even the Kohen Gadol, presumably a person of great moral standing. Unfortunately, we know that wasn't always the case in the second Beit HaMikdash with the Kohen Gadol, but theoretically, at least, the Kohen Gadol of a great moral standing, even they would be subject to feelings of unpleasant thoughts, if you like, to one another, rivalry, and possible enmity. And the Gemara acknowledges that and tells us that a possible rival shouldn't go and put himself in that position. So I think it's a very interesting Gemara, this. I think we've learned lots of things. We've learned the origin of our minhag, and we've learned a bit about human nature. Ein chadash tachat hashemesh, nothing new under the sun, which is, by the way, the title of this week's Jerusalem Post article. You'll get it tomorrow. But it's there in the Gemara. Yes, David.
Yeah, it's a socio-economic thing as well, because obviously it would make sense for the emeritus, if he could, to leave the community and go and live somewhere else. But back in the day, the rabbi lived, certainly in the London communities, the rabbi lived in the shul house, and he didn't have the finances to be able to buy his own home when he retired.
Yes, that was a massive problem in the United Synagogue, massive problem. And fortunately, well, not fortunately, that I had a friend of mine who fell foul of that. There was a friend of mine who you all know, or at least some of you know, I'm not going to mention a name, who was a rabbi in a community, lived in a shul house for many years. There was massive house inflation at that time, talking about in the 90s. And when it came for the time that he moved on, and his next job, which was a step up, did not have a shul house, he did not have the means to buy a property. He was proper stuck. And it was a real massive problem. So I was aware of that. So when my son Dan became a shul rabbi, I was aware that this was a real problem, and he was given a house, or he was given a shul property. The shul paid for accommodation for him when he had his first two jobs in Liverpool, in Bowden, and then Liverpool. And I, when he got married, said to myself and to my family, I don't want him to fall into that trap. So we made sure that he had a property, which he rented out. We bought a property on a mortgage, like any normal newly married person would do. and he didn't live in it. He rented it out. And then when he went to Australia, after the first year where he was in rented accommodation, and then he decided he was going to stay, he had something to sell. And so he was on the property market. Otherwise, he'd have been in the same boat as that. And that problem that David's described was a very common problem. Rabbi Ginsbury, who we mentioned earlier, in Shrubberies, there was no shul house. So he had his own house. But of course, he moved from Prestwich to Hendon, which effectively made it impossible for him to buy a house because of the differential in prices. So what the United Synagogue did there was that he bought half the house and the United Synagogue bought the other half, which would have been a problem when he came to retire, because then what's he got to do? He's got to somehow buy the other part of the house. So this is quite a common thing, and it's common knowledge, so I'm saying thing out of thing. What happened was that every 5 years, 10% of the shul's equity in the house over to the So for 25 years, the 50% has gone to 25 years and now owns the whole.
We've lost you. Can't hear you.
No good? Okay, tell me when I'm back, and then we'll finish on this. Tell me when I'm back. Yes, better? No? Good? Bad?
Yes,
okay.
yes, yeah.
So, right. So Rabbi Ginsbury in Hendon, every 5 years, 10% of the equity was released to him. So after 25 years, he now owns the whole property. He's actually been there 25 years this year. So, yeah, he left Prestwich in 1999, and he's been there 25 years. So now the house that he lives in, he still lives in the same house. He bought the 50% himself, and after 25 years of service, he now owns the whole of that house. But what David was pointing out is, if you didn't do something like that, what would happen then was, what you're going to do? Because the emeritus, you can't kick him out of his house, and then the new guy's not got a shul house to live in. So it was a very difficult problem, as well as being a covered problem, as well as being a rivalry problem. As David points out, it was traditionally a very difficult financial problem as well. That's a very interesting point and a very important point. And again, it's really interesting to discuss it, nothing to do with our Gemarah, but it really is to do with our Gemarah, because there's nothing new under the sun. And what's interesting for me anyway, as you all know, I'm very obsessed with history. I find the historical change in society, I find it a fascinating subject, sociological change, and this is just another demonstration of it. So at that point, we'll call it a day. Any questions or comments? We've learned quite a bit today, even though we didn't do that many words. We've learned quite a bit. We will start over here next time, please God. There's no real spoilers, so you can read on if you want. We'll do that next time. Any questions? Okay, in that case, Shavua Tov for the rest of the Shavua. See you soon.
Thanks, John.